For the Lessons Learned in Higher Education series that I'm doing, I'd like to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes of an administrator in online and hybrid classes or programs. One aspect to consider, as in all institutions of higher education and also K-12 and also pre-K, is the importance of professional development and that communication that administrators have with educators as far as their professional development and also the administrator's professional development. We have sort of a new frontier, not so new, but with changing technology, everything is always changing. So to keep the lines of communication open is very important. To have that transparency of what types of qualities that you are looking for in educators, what the goals and objectives of that program are, and also to keep an open door policy, and and say that I'll be popping in and seeing how things are going. I will be checking to make sure that everything is working, and if there are any problems to let me know, and always have that rapport with your educators that not only are you saying this is how the program is, but that it's flexible, that you are approachable, and that you are their colleague, that you will be helping to improve that program, and you're working towards a common goal. A colleague on campus encouraged me to encourage other educators to go silo-free. And silo-free means not to stay within those walls, those educational walls, those professional walls, but to open yourself up and to share what you're doing. A few years ago, I wrote a blog article about how professional learning networks are becoming more and more online. And I think this is because you can include more in your network. You can go international with open social media. You can always have closed networks institutionally, but also you can open it up to the world. And a few years ago, I wrote a blog piece about how for years I had a Twitter account, never used it. I didn't see anything that I could use it for. And finally, I realized there were a lot of educators on Twitter, and they would post articles and useful practical tips for example, language learning, and the list goes on. And so I had my coming out on social media. This is our digital life right now. We have an overabundance of information, but how much of that do we want to siphon, and how much of that is really meaningful for us? And so this idea of curation comes up once again. We are going to have to curate the good stuff. And one of my endeavors for the professional learning network that I started for language education and educators was to provide resources that people could refer to, and to build that network to see what other people are doing, maybe problem solve, offer what you're doing. You might be doing something similar in some way that another person in a different field is doing, technology-wise, for example. And so you have to provide professional learning tools and resources that are easily accessible and free. And we need this because we are getting into an educational landscape that is unlike what a lot of educators have had for a very long time. And I think imagine what virtual spaces and teaching and learning in virtual spaces is like, and how it does change approaches, it does change how you do things. Part of my professional learning network that I'm trying to build, open sourcing, is to provide people, for example, what is an orientation quiz like for students? What is an instructor readiness quiz like? To ask those questions of how ready are you to teach online? These sorts of resources that we had to build from the ground up in a lot of ways to mold it to language, the language program. So, and I think each discipline will have a little bit different orientation, but there are some global questions. And I mentioned to one presenter in a breakout session that eventually, and this is something I talked about, I think, in a previous idea, is adaptive learning tools, not only for learning, but also for training. And so those that are more proficient in something would be streamlined into different questions that were a little bit more particular and a little bit more detailed, more expertise level, let's say, and you could be rated according to your readiness, for example. So you wouldn't have to take, maybe the 100-point quiz. You'd only have to take maybe 25 questions to kind of get you, okay, you're all ready, you've had this experience, etc., etc. Because I think eventually we won't have to do such thorough orientation, such thorough professional development or training for people who have a lot of experience. And that was, if you think of brick and mortar classroom courses and everything that's involved in a program like that, there are very similar activities that you would do in administration on the online and hybrid side, but the approach is a little bit different. For example, some ways to observe your educators who are teaching online or hybrid is, in the program I was working in, we had a home base. We had offices in a physical location that students could make appointments with us in a physical space if they chose to. But our educators also offered hours where they just could hop online, so it could be both. So how does an administrator observe someone who's teaching online? And this is something you need to consider if you are planning to provide online courses or hybrid courses. You need to have not only a mentorship going on, and sometimes this is a problem for smaller programs because there's so few people and there's multiple duties and obligations that each position has. You learn very quickly as an educator and administrator in online and hybrid programs that you're a little bit of a jack of all trades or Jill of all trades. So you need versatile educators, versatile administrators who can problem solve on the spot because technology glitches happen. So administrators, when they observe online and hybrid, there are a lot of differences from the classroom aspect. A lot of them blend over because the learning management systems, for example, there's a lot of things that are digitized in classroom courses as well. But one very difficult part of administrating is this online and hybrid observation or evaluation of teaching that goes on. And it's a very important one because not only does a program want to know, does an administrator want to know, but the instructor, the educator wants to know what they're doing well and what they need to improve on. And not only from the aspect of the students, but also as a whole for the department or for the future opportunities that these educators would have. And one of the things that I try to promote when recruiting is to emphasize this point that programs around the country and around the world are going to want educators who can teach online, who have this proficiency. And yes, it's good teaching is translatable into the online environment, but there are certain things that you need to be comfortable with, that you can switch gears. Our team came up with evaluation of teaching, and part of the evaluation of teaching came from feedback from students that we had. We gave surveys every module, every learning module, and part of that, half of it was content-based, half of that was based on a series of questions based on their interactions with their online or hybrid educators, their teachers. So there were red flags that would come up in the student evaluations, and you could tell when they made, and we would identify the instructors based on those surveys. Also, if someone is doing an online appointment, but their part of their hours could be conducted at home, I could, for example, if it's a web conferencing tool like Google Hangouts, our program also piloted Adobe Connect, but there are other tools like Skype for groups as well. I could sit in and just observe those interactions based on what was said, gestures. Educators, I think, who are good in the classroom look out into the crowd and see if students are getting it. The same holds true for web conferencing sessions, for example, or discussion boards. What kind of questions are asked? How are the comments monitored? What is the promptness of replies is considered with online observations. So I would sit in on a physical brick and mortar office or appointments with students, and we also had small conversation groups that I sat in on and took notes, and then I would follow up with the instructor how those sessions went, and they knew I was there. But also some observations came from me. I would be in another office and I would keep an open ear to what was going on. That there was a repeated problem, I would have to address it. One part of my work life that people probably didn't know as an administrator is that my work day started around 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I have children, so I get up in the morning to get everything ready, but also our program was appointment based, so students needed to make, for example, online appointments by 8 a.m. so we could plan and digitize materials if we were going to do screen sharing ahead of time, and just to prepare mentally for those appointments that would happen whatever time during the day. So I would check all the schedules. I would know everybody's schedule. My knowledge of instructors' schedules helped me mentally prepare for the day, because I could see which students were seeing which instructors, and before the semesters would ever start, I got to know these students very well based on their backgrounds, their interests, their level, any kind of technology discomfort, for example, whatever type of student they were, and the questions they asked, and we provided surveys, so I got to know the students ahead of time before that. And this type of information was also available to the instructors who handled the orientation meetings with the students, who got to know them even before the classes started. So I have this big picture for each of my days to help me for any problems that might come up. And with online learning, you can check with the learning management system. There is a backside of the learning management system for educators where you can see everything is time-stamped. When everybody logs in, they check or click on anything, we see that information. And not only for the students, but also for the instructors. So I have that view of the types of patterns that instructors would, when they would handle, for example, homework reading or post things online. And if ever there were issues with technology, for example, there were Skype meetings, I would double check to make sure that the equipment was working. That was one of my tasks, is to make sure there's a functioning webcam, the computers were up to date, software was good, and to provide that tech support for our instructors, because you want to make sure things work smoothly. And not only that things work smoothly, but if they don't, that you have a backup plan. So, there are different levels of observation that go on. So an administrator of the program would observe the educators in that program, and also the interactions that they were having, both in physical locations and also virtual environments. And there would be a conversation that would happen, usually an ongoing informal conversation of how things were going and what can be improved in the program. There were always things that we could improve, and I always valued the educators' feedback, whether they were negative or positive, and there were always things that we needed to improve. But it's always also good to get that feedback, that individual feedback about what's working and what's not working. And sometimes it was a matter of staffing. We just didn't have the people to improve it enough. And that's one of the frustrations I think a lot of online and hybrid educators have, that there's not enough people to do certain things. And one of the center's employees once says, yeah, it's like we're band-aiding things all the time. It's just like we're doing this triage for our course to make sure everything still works. But And I think that can be applicable in other projects that you're doing too, that are cutting edge, or any type of underfunded programs perhaps that you're trying to improve and do the best that you can. But for the observations that we did, there were also follow-ups that we did with the higher administrators in the department, and also at more of a college level too. We had an involvement and a network with not only our department but also at the college level and the university level as well. So there were multiple tiers to let people know how things were going and to share information. There were some organizations, some groups, some working groups that we exchanged ideas, and this could be interdisciplinary. A lot of the approaches to teaching and how you're using educational technology were applicable across all disciplines, so that was nice as well. But we would follow up with administrators about how certain educators were doing, what needed to be improved on, and keep that conversation going. And also, as an evaluation, there's so many things to do, but what's also important is to provide evaluation of how the program is doing, what suggestions that the educators have to make the program better, including the supervision of that program by the administrator. So there always has to be this multi-directional observation going on and evaluation that's ongoing. And however you are going to observe your educators in a program, it's important to have a transparency, to show them how they're going to be evaluated at the student level, to have them go through an orientation, whether they are first starting to teach or that they go through the different aspects of the program each semester that they're teaching, because there are a lot of adjustments that are made after each semester. So they would get a report from me about what I really found that they were doing well, and then also action points, actionable items that they needed to work on to improve their online or hybrid teaching. And these were based on both students' comments, things that I observed, also the centers people would observe if they came late to appointments, for example, or missed Skype appointments completely. And after a few iterations, we were able to come up with formulas of, for example, how much seat time do educators have with online and hybrid education? It's very important to consider this. It should be comparable to the classroom, and we need to, if they're getting paid the same. So we came up with some evaluation tools on how many minutes or hours instructors would spend on grading, how much face-to-face time they would have if it were via web conferencing or in person in hybrid situations, how much time they were spending with, for example, digitizing materials if you were screen sharing, if it was easier to correct something and then put that up on the screen. Sometimes it was easier just to do things like markings in a different color that were easier, or how much time it took to type up comments, because these comments that you give students in online and hybrid environments are very important. You don't have as much seat time in where you're face-to-face with students to give them that valuable feedback. So a lot of it is written, so you do spend a lot of time coming up with comments and wording things in certain ways so your message is clear. So we came up with formulas of how much time instructors would spend doing certain tasks. So as administrators, you need to consider this as part of your evaluation. Give instructors regular evaluations or surveys where they list how long it takes them to do certain tasks. And that way you can get a better picture of how much time they invest in their course. And one of the administrator phrases I use is "in the trenches." Across the years, I was in education, higher education, and community college at the 4-year institutions, and I learned very quickly that good programs had administrators who were in the trenches. They experienced what their educators were experiencing. And the minimal that you can do to help out a program to improve it is to teach a course in your program. So there's this discussion about who should administrators be. They should have a good foundation in teaching and learning and education, not just their discipline. For example, if you're in higher education, you need to create less separation between what you're administrating and what students and educators are experiencing in that online or blended learning environment. And once administrators get a taste of what it takes to teach in that environment, they get a better understanding of how to improve the program from their perspective with their skills in administration. And so that is one aspect that really helped me, having come through as an educator, as a different institutions, community college or four-year institutions of higher education, and to get your hands dirty with different tasks that educators have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so you can create an environment, a better environment, with whatever tools that are available, with whatever support that is available, to help those educators out and to make the experience better for both students, educators, and administrators in the end.